Hey everyone, welcome back to another roundtable. Today we are sitting with Gabrielle, and she's going to tell us all about her work as someone who has had a group practice, sold her group practice, and now is living freely almost as a digital nomad. So I'm so excited to get in today's show. I'm going to let Gabrielle go ahead and introduce herself, and then we'll get into it.
Yay! I'm so excited to talk with you because I feel like we have a lot to talk about. So I'll start with introducing myself. I'm Gabrielle. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I now live in Sarasota, Florida, and Shauna is right. I am almost a digital nomad. I travel all the time for work, to run retreats, and for speaking engagements. I previously owned a group practice in Denver, and I scaled that bitch to 15 people and
Wow.
7+ figures in revenue. And I got super burnt out. So in 2021, I sold my practice and stayed on for a year during the transition. And then I stopped seeing therapy clients December 2022. And then since then, I kind of have like two parts of my business. I do Medicare and Medicaid consulting. Um, for solo practitioners all the way up to like large mental health platforms on compliance and documentation and audits. And then the other part of my business, I do business coaching and strategy to help people scale into group practice sustainably, to sell their practices, to add other income streams. I'm also an international speaker. I host retreats. I have an Etsy store. So I'm telling you all those things because if you're listening to this, hopefully that will get your gears going of all the different things you can do as a therapist.
This is amazing because there's so much here. And I think this is really big because a lot of times when therapists are talking about like what they want to do with their career, like there seems to be like a pipeline into group practice, right? It's like you're going to
Yes.
start your private practice, you're going to grow that into a group practice. You know, you have your 6 or 7 figure business, and then that's it. There isn't anything beyond that. So, what inspired you to even start your group practice in the first place?
Yes. So I don't have the greatest story about that, which is fine because I think this is what happens to a lot of people is I was like, "Oh, my caseload is full. Now what do I do? I would
Mm.
like to make more money. I have tons of clients calling me." And by the way, this was like in 2017, 2018. So it was a different time. Okay. It was a little bit of a different world. And to me, I was like, oh, I'm seeing 28 clients. Should I just try and see 35? Which is crazy.
A lot. Yeah.
So what ended up happening actually is I'm also a Zumba instructor, and one of my Zumba students was an OT, and she's worked in home health, and she's like, I have an MSW that works with me. She's licensed, an LCSW, and she's like, she totally wants to be in private practice. You should talk to her and see if you can hire her. And I was like, okay. So I did, and I was like, she's cool. I like her. I'm gonna hire her. I had no idea what I was doing. I luckily had like a friend of a friend who was an attorney who wrote my contract for me. And when I hired her, she was seeing just a couple of clients, and I'm laughing because I didn't know what I was doing. So I paid her 80% of a split. So, which is very bad. Don't do that. It's way too much. And I learned that. And then she eventually came on full time, and we changed that real quick when she was fine with it. But I learned a lot from her. And I also learned like, there, this is fun. I like this. I, at the time, liked managing people. And I saw that we could make a bigger impact in my community without it all being me doing all of the one-on-one sessions.
So you hired in somebody, you learned very quickly about a better split. It sounds like a lot of the stuff that you were doing were kind of like on the spot, like, oh yeah, this makes sense. We'll try this and see what happens. So when did you start to like incorporate strategy with your practice, or did you ever begin to incorporate strategy when it came to the practice?
I did. I wish I would have done it sooner, but I honestly feel like the group practice ownership was like a universe lesson teaching me to like work through a ton of my own shit that I had been ignoring. And so I think probably when I got to like, honestly, I think the third person that I hired, I was like, I need to like figure this shit out. Like I can't just keep being like, let's meet for coffee and I'll show you how to go through simple practice. Like I was like, I need this to be a system. And that's when I started like actually working on strategy. And I just am also lucky that one of my best friends has her MBA and she really helped with coaching. So she was the one who was like, you need to, you know, track your KPIs. You need to
Mm.
see where your referrals are coming from. This is what your profit margin should be. And I'm so grateful and thankful for her because she just kind of she started that, but then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I actually love this and I love research and strategy. And so that is so important because when you want to sell, you need to have all of that stuff already implemented and done, and you can't slap together a profitable business in like 90 days because you're burnt out and you're over it. Like, this is stuff that takes years and years to build upon. So, I cannot stress that enough. If you even think like I'll never ever sell, it doesn't matter. You should still act as if you are because your business will be profitable and sustainable and efficient. And those are all things that you want.
Hmm. And you know what's really funny is that I don't think a lot of people realize that that is a possibility to be able to sell a practice. A good friend of mine, her parents, specifically her grandparent, and her dad, went into like they started a business,
Mhm.
and they sold their business. It was like a practice. It wasn't specifically mental health. It was intellectual disability services, but they sold that practice and it generated quite a bit of wealth for the family. Like they were able to go on and buy beach houses and ranches and things like that. But and they went back and they started another company
Yes.
that they grew, and it was a fairly large company. It had several places, like several locations across the state, which was really cool. But how they really started was that one business that they built up and then they sold for quite a bit of a profit. Um, it's not something that we always actively think about, but I think that is great advice to, really be thinking about um, building your practice in a way that it can be sold. Like you can hand this over to someone for a profit. So I know you spent a year in the practice while it was being handed over. About how long would you say the process entirely took for you? And what was it like searching for someone, or how did you come to the decision that selling your practice was the right thing to do for
So
you?
I also didn't really like ever think about doing this or think that this was an option. I feel like when I hear about people selling, it was always some huge thing, right? Like Verizon and blah blah blah, like merge for a multi-billion dollar deal. So I never really thought of it in this sense either. But I actually remember in this must have been like spring 2021. I was talking to my friend and I was like, I hate this. I'm super burnt out. I I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like so much has changed. I was just really feeling it and I'm like, I don't think this is for me. So we just kind of like back of the napkin math, did some rough
Hmm.
estimates and I was like, first of all, who's gonna buy this? And second of all, I don't think that's enough money. So I just like tabled it. And then I was on vacation in July 2021, and I just got a phone call out of the blue, and they left me a message, and they were like, "We represent a outpatient clinic in a different state, and
Hmm.
we want to acquire your practice. Call us back." So I was like, that's totally spam. I'm not calling them. And my friend was like, no, that's how these deals happen. Like, research them, which I did, and they were legit. And she's like, and then get on a call with them. So I did. So that's how it happened. It does happen like that actually a lot, but typically what people do is you work with a broker and you would list your practice. It's just like listing your house for sale. It's very, very similar. So a broker will have all of those connections and they'll have a network and they will list it for you. And of course, they take a commission. So mine happened a little bit differently. And you can do that. You could also sell to like one of your own clinicians or like another practice owner in your community or even like a hospital. So there's a million different ways that you can do it. That's how I did mine. And ours happened very quick also because we were both very motivated. So usually these deals can take, I would say, a year on the higher end. It could take 2 years. Usually it doesn't take that long.
Huh.
Mine happened in 90 days. So
Wow.
just ready. And also, I was really organized and I had my books were clean. I had my taxes ready to go. I had my insurance contracts, like everything was documented. So that really, really helped. Um, and then I think like, so I technically sold it on December 31st, 2021. And I would say about 6 to 7 months is really when we got to the point where it was like, I don't need to be here anymore. You guys have it figured out. We had done a lot of stuff internally, like switched over payroll and like we had to switch EHRs and things like that. But it happened, pretty quickly, I would say.
Oh, wow. What was it like for you to like kind of hand off your business? Was it like, oh my God, my baby? Or were you like, thank goodness?
I was at the thank goodness point. And my attorney was like, listen, we have another huge, like 10, $15 million deal happening, which by the way, mine was not like that, but this was a totally different industry. He's like,
Mhm.
that guy is dragging his feet because it is his baby and he's about to get $10 million, but he isn't ready to give it up, which is totally common. I think I had
Mm.
really, like I said, just burned myself to the max. And I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I knew in my heart and my soul and my body that this was not meant for me anymore. Although it was hard in the beginning, it was a big shift, but something my broker actually told me was like, you're too much like narrowly focused. You need to think of your whole life, right? Like everything you want, and this is just the stepping stone to get to the next thing. And when he said it like that, I was like, damn, that's true. That's exactly how I'm going to think about this. I'm going to use this as like the launch pad for whatever I'm going to do next.
That makes so much sense, and I love that, like, this is just the stepping stone into the next part of your life. I think that for a lot of clinicians, our thought process is like, we've stepped into the next part of our life once we've obtained that degree, we've started our practice, we've got this booming, group practice, but there like, after that, it's like, "Okay, and then what?" Like, what do we really wanna do with that? Do we really want to be providing therapy? Do we really want to be the leader of these big practices like this? Some people, that's a yes, right? They want to be the CEOs. But for many of us, we want to be able to have that career flexibility that allows for us to drive in an income that creates financial stability for us while also being able to enjoy it, and not having to be in somebody's office, even if that somebody is you, from time in and time out.
Yep, exactly. And so it just was like, yeah, this is not feeding how I want it to. It's not working with my life anymore. And like, sure, there are people who own group practices forever, and that's totally fine too. But also just thinking about like, what's your exit plan? What are you going to do when
Mhm.
you retire? Are you just going to close it down? Somebody else going to take it over? Like I'm thinking about your friends' grandparents who like were able to build wealth for their family and for future generations. So there's so many things to think about, but having an exit plan is important. You can't work forever. Nobody wants to.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears. You've come out of your private practice, and or your group practice actually, and now how did you decide like what your next steps were? Like, how did you decide like I'm going to start speaking engagements or I'm going to do consultation? Like, what did that look like for you?
So some of it happened organically, some of it was more intentional. I had already been helping people with Medicare and Medicaid stuff since like 2020 probably. So I already had a Facebook group for that. So I was like, I'm gonna focus on that. And then I had done some business coaching with somebody also in 2020, and something we worked on with her was talking about like group practice ownership. So I started a Facebook group for that too, but I already was like so burnt out. I was like, I don't want to talk about group practice.
Mhm.
So I kind of just like shelved that. But then when I came back to it after I sold, I was like, there's already 1,000 people in here, and I'm not even doing anything. If I tried to grow this, it would probably grow even more, which it has. So those kind of two things were in the pipeline. And then, I mean, it is kind of an identity crisis or shift after you sell. And I had gone on a retreat. I had started doing like some of my own deeper spiritual work. And I just also noticed, like, obviously, everybody in this world, our world, is super burnt out, is wanting to work in
Mhm.
different ways. I want to help people do that. So that's where the retreats came from, because they're focused on polyvagal theory and sound healing and nervous system regulation and all the things that I wished I had really tuned into. So that's where the retreats were born, because I just kept hearing people talk about it. And because I also talk about burnout, I started just getting speaking engagements for that too. So then I started being more intentional about speaking engagements and training, because that does definitely take more of a strategy. It kind of started as like this thing that happened. Like the first training I ever did, somebody was like, I do trainings for continue.com. Do you want to do that? And I was like, that sounds fun. And then I did it and I loved it. So then I really put more emphasis, and I still do, on pitching and doing clinical or continuing education trainings. So all just kind of like happened in the way that it needed to. But I do like strategy is important, even though I'm talking mostly about like my own intuition. I use some of that because it's important to me to do things that I'm excited about and that feel good and that align with my values. But then I take that feeling and I put it into strategy.
That makes sense. And I think that is so important because a lot of times we have the intuition, but we just don't know what's the next step after that. And I think it's the same thing with private practice. Like you kind of start your private practice, but there isn't as much strategy for us because it's not something that's formally taught. So oftentimes we're like learning from other people, or we're kind of just like learning from what we see in our communities, like whether it's a Facebook group or word of mouth. And then by the time we're in it, like that's when we start to incorporate the strategy. We've like already started up the practice and all of that, and then like it comes a little bit later. So I think it's really important to recognize that you can have both. Like you can have the intuition and then still utilize strategy to kind of further that and expand out.
Exactly, because that's how it builds and that's how it becomes something that's sustainable and profitable. Because I was the same way, by the way. I think I should mention that too. Like, yes, I had this big practice and I sold it, but I will tell you, I didn't know what an NPI was when I started my practice. I was literally like Googling, what is an NPI? How do I get one? How do I credential with insurance? And this was like 2017. So there wasn't really any like that I knew of anyway, any coaches out there who had like courses and could help you on this. I had to figure it all out on my own and made a ton of mistakes. So I'm so grateful that like we have more social media now and that we have all of these communities, because it's so, so important to help you be successful, whatever success looks like for you.
Thank you for that. I think that that is like really amazing to just highlight. Like, I think we all start in a place where it's like, I have no idea that this is needed, or like this part is really important. I started off in I started off in community mental health, and so I had to have an NPI for community mental health, and that has kind of like followed along. But like even when you start a group practice, you usually get the NPI too, or there's like so many things so many intricacies that we just don't know about from the business perspective, which is really unfortunate for clinicians because, again, that's the line of work that we do, but it's not the thing that's formally taught to us. So, like, we end up learning these things by asking so many questions to get there. And most of the times we often have to like go back and reinvest into our practices, our businesses, just to get that extra bit of information. Or
Yeah,
you learn by accident and
yeah, a little bit.
hope that it's not a costly accident.
Yeah, which it can be. And, I do coaching or consulting with people all the time, and they have made really big mistakes. But it's like, how would you know that? You wouldn't,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And that sucks. But,
Yeah.
I still reinvest in myself now, especially since my work is like a little bit different now. Like, I have an OBM, which is an online business manager. And let me tell you, even
Ooh.
a year ago, I like barely knew what that was. 2 years ago, I had no idea what the hell that was or that I would ever need that. But it's what I need in my online business. So,
That makes sense. Then, like, I think that's so important. Something that I was just thinking about that you mentioned, is like the amount of times that I have had like a client call with someone who was like, "Yeah, I had a private practice, but then I closed it and went back to working for, an organization or something like that," is really high. Like, I've noticed that clinicians will often start their work and finish it or close it or, shun away from it because there's just so much. They became burned out by even doing private practice work to begin with because a lot of times they don't have all of the information that they need to kind of sustain in it or even get to the point of like growing it beyond,
yeah.
the full-time caseload.
And we were kind of talking about this before we were recording. We were talking about tools to use to make life easier.
Hmm.
And and it's true. Somebody who just recently told me, she was like, I tried in private practice and it's just too much marketing and billing, and I'm just gonna go back and work at my old job. And there's, that's fine. And like there's nothing to be ashamed of with that. And I think that's important to know too, like your tolerance for risk. Are you somebody that is good, going with the flow? Because there are really low lows and there are really high highs, and sometimes they're in the same day, and sometimes it's 6 months of just one. So you have to really be prepared for all of that because you are an entrepreneur. And in the world we live in now, there are so many things that can
Mm.
help you. Like, even just your EHR is the first one. Like, make sure you're using everything that it has to offer, all of the automations, all of the reports, all of the reminders, like all of those things take things off your plate. And that's just a starting point. But there's so many things you can do to make the lift a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And that's actually something that I posted on today is like doing a strategic audit of everything that you have in place because a lot of times you have things that are overrunning and you don't even realize it. Or you're not using the EHR that you're probably paying a lot of money for once a month to its full extent. And I think like, a couple of months ago, I worked with a coach who was like, y'all not broke enough for me. And it really stuck with me because like sometimes we're using the systems that we have not to its full extent, as
Mhm.
if we're not worried about our savings, as if we're not worried about like, the next clients that you have coming in. And I think we really can go back and look at our overhead and see how and what we're using, what we're paying for, and how well we are using it.
And if you're ever going to sell your practice, you'll want to look at those things too,
Mhm.
because you want it to be streamlined and easy, and you don't want overlaps because that costs money and inefficiencies. So, like if you use, I don't know, if you use Simple Practice, then I said you could, or maybe like the best way to do it, to think about it is like if you have Simple Practice, don't be using Doxy and
Mhm.
Zoom and like this over here for reminders. Like, have everything condensed into one as much as you can, especially because, just like you said, you're paying a lot of money for it and they all have lots of features. So make sure you're using them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And a EHR like Simple Practice it's like a one-stop shop. There's so many things that they've been loading into it. And so and oftentimes when you're starting up your private practice, you kind of look at your EHR as like, okay, what can I get for the least amount versus like what can I really invest in and get the most use out of so that I don't have to go back and like double this system somewhere or figure out this thing another place. Like even something that has all of the automations that you need so that once you say yes to a consultation, it's just automatic. You press a button and emails go out and you don't have to worry about calling to remind them or billing or whatever. It's all there and the full system just kind of starts working without you doing much.
I cannot stress that enough. I just did a consult with somebody this week and she's getting audited by insurance
Ooh.
and
Mm.
she does not use an EHR. So all of her notes are handwritten. She handwrites them every single time. And I was like, we are going to change this. This is too much of your time. And now you have to like scan all of these notes securely and send them when if you just had it all here, it would just be a one button click.
hmm And
So
you send it forward and you don't have to worry about it. Yeah. I hope, oh my goodness,
I
not
know.
an audit. I hope that that goes well for her and that there isn't anything that comes out of that because that's another thing that can burn people out really quickly from their private practices. I know that you sound like a highly creative person. With all that you're doing now, do you feel fulfilled as someone who is highly creative or that you're like able to do the things that call your creativity?
I do. And I didn't like 6 or 8 months ago. I went through like another little burnout phase. So I did some more strategy and I actually wrote everything down and did like a strategy audit basically of like, these are all of my offerings. How much joy does each one bring me?
Mhm.
and and I used that and I got rid of a lot of things that weren't bringing me joy. And so now I'm back in the flow of like my schedule is how I want it. I'm doing all the things that I like to do and I'm making space for hobbies and travel and all of those other things outside of work that, bring me joy too. Those glimmers.
That is amazing. And I want to say I was right there with you 6 months ago.
What was
Like,
happening?
yeah, in a phase of, I called it my revision, but just like pulling things out, like really simplifying, making sure that it made sense for me and like allowing for space to kind of like open up for my hobbies so that I was doing a little bit of everything, right? Like making sure that I had space to and time to pay attention to my little one and engage with her. And then also, find time to build garden and those kinds of things, but also create work that was fulfilling and that was along the lines of what I was doing while also getting paid because that is important.
Is. It totally is. And, I think I've kind of gone through that a couple times too. And I still have like a lot of shoulds in my heads about this is what
Mhm.
work should look like. And I've had to do a lot of work on the mindset and letting all those things go. But that's why we do this is to build a life, your dream life. Like, how do you want it to be? And I know that's very privileged, but I'm the same way. Like, we talk a lot about success, and I think people also when they hear a lot of my story they think like success equals money and I'm like actually it's the fact that I never set an alarm unless I'm getting
Mhm.
on a flight and I have to go to the airport. I do not wake up to an alarm ever, and that to me is like one of the biggest things that makes me feel rich, I guess what I would say.
I love that. Like it feels like you're on vacation all the time if you don't have to set an alarm. You just
And that
set it.
works for me also because clearly I'm an ADHDer and I need a lot of time in the morning. I need a slow morning. I need time to wake up and have coffee and hopefully go to the gym on a good day. And so I never do anything like any meetings, never before 10 a.m. And
Mm.
I set it up that way.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So you've shared a lot with us today. Thank you so much for that. Tell us about where we can find you.
I'm pretty easy to find because of my name. So I am at GJV Consulting on Instagram, on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. I'm at Gabrielle Juliano-Villani, and that's the same. My website is gabriellejulianovillani.com. My other website is Medicare Consulting for Therapists.com. I have a Facebook group of the same name, and my other Facebook group is Create an Abundant Group Practice.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all of this with us. Yeah, y'all definitely go out, look for Gabrielle's Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I've seen a couple of your TikToks and I think they're amazing. And tune in for more roundtables. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.